They say the wilderness is beautiful, but it doesn't play by our rules. Every year, hikers, hunters, and even casual campers venture into bear country thinking they'll be fine, until nature reminds them who's really in charge. These aren't just close calls or scratches. These are the most brutal bear attacks ever recorded. Shocking, savage, and absolutely real. These encounters show just how fast a peaceful moment in the woods can turn into a fight for survival.
Not me. Hi.
For 13 summers, Timothy Treadwell lived on the edge of civilization, deep in the wild heart of Alaska, where grizzly bears roam and the rules of man no longer apply. He camped alone among the bears, gave them names, spoke to them like old friends. It was October 2003. The bears were shifting into survival mode, leaner now, hungrier, more dangerous. Most had vanished into hibernation, but not all. The ones that remained were restless, desperate, and unpredictable. By his side was Amy Huguenard, a physician assistant who had joined him in Alaska despite her growing fear. She had wanted to go home, but love, sometimes, keeps people in places they should have left. They had planned to return to California, flights booked, but at the last minute, a small dispute with an airline ticket agent set off Treadwell's temper. Rather than leave, he made a fateful decision: go back into the park. He wanted to stay one more week, one last search for a female bear he hadn't seen yet. He thought he was safe. They set up camp near a salmon stream, a feeding ground. But that year, the salmon were few, and the bears that haunted the edges of the river weren't the familiar ones. On one of his final recordings, Treadwell caught a bear on camera, big, gaunt, and agitated, digging through the shallows for scraps. On October 5th, he made a routine satellite phone call to a friend in Malibu. No sign of panic, just idle conversation. It was the last time anyone would hear from him alive. The next day, a bush pilot arrived at the camp for pickup. What he found was unsettling. The campsite had been destroyed, tents crushed, gear scattered. A massive grizzly lingered nearby. When rangers arrived, what they uncovered was horrific. Not far from the camp were the remains of Timothy Treadwell, his severed head, a section of spine, and an arm, still wearing a wristwatch. Amy's body was partially buried under a mound of twigs and earth, food storage by bear instinct. The grizzly guarding the site was shot and killed. A second, younger bear that later charged at the rangers was also put down. Inside the stomach of the first bear, human remains, fingers, limbs, flesh from both Treadwell and Amy. But perhaps the most chilling discovery wasn't the bodies. It was the video camera they found in the debris. It hadn't captured the attack visually, but the audio was intact. 6 agonizing minutes of terror, screams, roars, pleading, death. The recording begins with Treadwell shouting, "I'm being killed out here!" You can hear Amy's voice, panicked, desperate, telling him to play dead. There's a pause, a silence, a retreat. Then the bear comes back. The screams return, louder, until finally there's only silence. The camera had been recording the whole time. It had all happened so fast, there wasn't even time to remove the lens cap. Filmmaker Werner Herzog, who would later create Grizzly Man based on Treadwell's life, listened to the audio once. He refused to include it in his documentary. He called it too horrific, too personal, a moment no one should be forced to hear. Treadwell's story divided people. Some saw him as a misguided idealist. Others called him a reckless fool. Park officials had warned him again and again, don't get too close, don't interfere, don't treat the wild like a sanctuary. He broke every rule, camped illegally, ignored bear safety protocols, believed he was special, that the bears loved him back. But they didn't. Wildlife ecologist Tom Smith said it best, "It's tragic, but it's not unpredictable." In the end, Treadwell became what he had always feared for the bears, a casualty of misunderstanding.
A father died protecting his children in a rare polar bear attack in Canada's northernmost territory of Nunavut.
On July 3, 2018, what was meant to be a peaceful, sacred family outing in the Canadian Arctic became a scene of unimaginable horror. That morning, 31-year-old Aaron Gibbons left Arviat, Nunavut with his young daughters, heading toward Sentry Island. Aaron wasn't a tourist. He was born of the North, carved by its cruelty and its beauty. Though he worked in a nearby gold mine, his spirit belonged to the land, the hunt, the quiet harmony between human and wilderness. That day, he wanted to show his daughters how to gather Arctic tern eggs, how to respect the balance of nature. As the day wore on, a creeping unease began to stir. Then, Aaron saw it, a pale shape moving through the landscape, a polar bear. At first, it was distant, a ghost against the white and gray, but then it moved with purpose. Slow at first, then faster. straight toward them. There was no time to think, no time to react in fear, only instinct. Aaron shouted to his daughters, "Run to the boat!" His voice hard, sharp, commanding. They listened. They didn't look back. They ran. But Aaron didn't follow. He turned, planted his feet, faced the charging predator. No weapon in hand, no protection. Only the overwhelming need to protect his children. He stood between them and a killing machine that could tear a man apart in seconds. And he didn't flinch. The bear hit him. His daughters, trembling in the boat just yards away, could only scream and cry as they watched their father be mauled before their eyes. By the time help arrived, it was too late. Aaron Gibbons was gone. His body lay broken and bloodied, but not in vain. His final act had been one of pure courage. The bear was shot and killed, but the real damage couldn't be undone. In Arviat, the grief was raw, and the anger ran deep. This wasn't just a rare tragedy. It was part of a pattern, one growing more dangerous every year. Some pointed to climate change, saying melting sea ice had driven bears inland in search of food. Others looked to Churchill, Manitoba, the polar bear capital of the world, where guided tours allowed people to get dangerously close to these wild predators. Aaron's uncle, Gordy Kidpick, a respected elder in the community, didn't stay silent. He spoke out about the risks his people were facing, warning that unless something changed, Aaron would not be the last. But amidst the questions, one truth echoed louder than all the rest. Aaron Gibbons was a hero. He was posthumously awarded Canada's Star of Courage, one of the nation's highest honors for bravery. But no medal could ever capture what he gave that day. No ceremony could ever fill the silence he left behind. What he left was more than a tragic headline. He left a story that shook the North to its core, a story of a father's sacrifice, of instincts stronger than fear, of love that chose death so that others might live.
Romania has Europe's largest brown bear populations living outside Russia. Their home is the vast Carpathian mountain range. Last week there was outrage when a 19-year-old trekker was mauled to death.
The Carpathian mountains, vast, rugged, and echoing with ancient silence, have always drawn wanderers seeking beauty and solitude. For 19-year-old Maria Diana, this wilderness was a dream. After months of grueling high school exams, she needed an escape, a reward, a breath of freedom. So in July 2024, she set out for the Yepi May Trail near Brauv, eager to hike with her boyfriend and witness the famous Spumoasa waterfall. But the trail would offer no reward, only a nightmare that still haunts the country. Maria had always felt at home in the mountains, the cool air, the sweeping views, the rush of adventure. This was her element. Her boyfriend, ever the supportive companion, joined her on the hike, but not everyone shared her excitement. Her mother, pregnant and weighed down by a mother's instinct, pleaded with her to reconsider. "Please, Maria," she said. "These mountains are dangerous." Maria had smiled, brushing off the worry. Nothing bad will happen. But it did. The first stretch of the trail was peaceful. Towering trees swayed above them. The sound of birds and rushing water surrounded them like music. Maria and her boyfriend laughed, snapped photos, wandered hand in hand. But deep in the woods, something stirred, something watching. A low growl broke the peace like a thunderclap. From the underbrush emerged a massive brown bear. It stood tall, heavy with muscle, and locked its eyes on them. Maria froze. Her boyfriend stumbled backward, and then the bear charged. In a burst of panic, they scrambled for their phones. Maria's voice shook as she called emergency services. "It's coming! Please, we need help!" Her boyfriend called too, both of them desperate. But there was no time, no cavalry racing in, just the forest and death closing in. The bear struck first at Maria, slashing deep into her leg. Her scream cut through the trees. She fought, kicked, clawed, but the bear was relentless. It dragged her from the trail toward the cliffside. Her boyfriend, helpless, watched in horror as the animal mauled the girl he loved. And then came the final moment. With terrifying strength, the bear hurled Maria over the edge. She fell, minus 400 feet down a sheer cliff. The forest went silent. When the Salvamont Prahova rescue team arrived, it was too late. The bear was still there, prowling near Maria's body, blood staining its fur. The team was forced to make a decision. A single shot rang out, and the bear collapsed. But the nightmare wasn't over. At the base of the cliff, Maria's body lay broken, battered and torn, evidence of a merciless struggle. Her injuries were catastrophic. Deep bites, gaping claw wounds. No one could have survived it. News of Maria's death spread across Romania like wildfire. Her boyfriend, shattered, could barely speak. "I should have done more," he whispered. "It should have been me." Even veteran rescuers were shaken. Dan Banu, head of the rescue team, called it the worst bear attack he had witnessed in more than 10 years. Maria's death ignited a storm of debate across the country. Romania, home to one of Europe's largest brown bear populations outside Russia, had already seen rising bear encounters. Public fear turned into political action. Within days, the government approved a controversial measure, culling nearly 500 bears to prevent future tragedies. But that decision sparked outrage. Environmentalists warned that the real danger wasn't the bears, it was us. Human expansion, deforestation, and careless tourism had pushed wildlife closer to people. The mountains weren't changing. We were. And killing hundreds of bears, they said, was nothing more than a bandage on a wound we refused to examine. Maria Diana's story became more than a headline. It became a reckoning, a painful reminder that no matter how beautiful the wilderness may seem, it is never tame. It doesn't obey our plans or care for our comfort. She had come to the mountains in search of peace. She found something else. And as the wind moves through the trees of the Yepi May Trail, her final scream echoes, a voice lost to the wild, but never forgotten.
The Department of Wildlife Resources confirms that 58-year-old Lester Harvey Jr. of Phoenix, Virginia, has died from his injuries after being hit by a bear falling from a tree on Monday morning.
It was December 9th, 2024, in the quiet woods of Lunenburg County, Virginia. For Lester C. Harvey Jr., 58 years old and a father of 5, it was meant to be just another day doing what he'd done his entire life, hunting. Lester was born for this. Raised in rural Virginia, he learned the rhythms of the forest before he could drive a car. Hunting wasn't just a sport to him, it was legacy. That morning, he joined family and close friends in the woods near Charles Hall Road, tracking a black bear. They had done this countless times before. Moving together through the dense trees, they spotted the bear. It had climbed up a tree, seeking escape. It wasn't uncommon. The group held their ground, watching from a distance as someone took aim. A single shot rang out, slicing through the still winter air. The bear was hit, and then came the moment that no one could have predicted. With no warning, the massive creature, several hundred pounds of muscle and instinct, tumbled from the tree, a black blur falling through bare branches. It landed directly on Lester, just 10 feet away from where he'd been standing. There was no time to react. No chance to move. The weight crushed him instantly, slamming him to the cold, hard ground. Panic erupted. His friends and family rushed to his side, trying desperately to move the bear off of him, shouting his name, calling for help. Paramedics arrived and rushed him to the hospital, where he held on for 4 long days, fighting through unimaginable pain. But on December 13th, Lester Harvey was gone. The Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources investigated and confirmed the truth. A freak accident. A shot fired and a bear fell. His death stunned the community. His son Josh wrote with heartbreak and pride, "Dad was doing what he loved most, hunting with me and some of his best friends when this happened. I love you, Dad. We made so many great memories together, and I'm grateful for everything you taught me." His daughter Lindsay's grief cut deeper. "I'm broken in ways I didn't know I could be. Please keep us in your prayers." Lester left behind his wife April, their 3 sons, 2 daughters, and 8 grandchildren, a family that had built their lives around his steady presence. Every Sunday meal, every story by the fireplace, every hunting trip, they all revolved around him, and suddenly that center was gone. At Mount Carmel United Methodist Church, people packed the pews, family, friends, neighbors, even folks who only knew him through his quiet acts of kindness. Tears were shed, stories were told. Some couldn't believe it. A bear falling from a tree? It sounded unreal. But it wasn't a myth, it was real, and it hurt like hell. Lester's death made headlines across the country. But for those who knew him, the news never captured the full picture. The way his laugh could fill a room, the way his eyes lit up around his grandkids, the way he always knew how to fix things, not just with tools, but with wisdom, with love, with time. In the end, the family chose to honor not the tragedy, but the man, the memories, the love. They said goodbye with stories of fishing trips, backyard cookouts, and long drives through backcountry roads. He may have died in a shocking way, but he lived with purpose, with heart. And he left a legacy no accident could erase. It was a cold November day in 2009 when a peaceful afternoon at Bern Bear Park in Switzerland turned into a waking nightmare. Families strolled along the park paths. Children pointed with delight at the majestic European brown bears below, unaware that within moments they would witness something few could ever forget. At the heart of the park, Finn, a 4-year-old 40-stone bear, paced within his enclosure. Towering, powerful, and revered, he was a living symbol of Bern's heritage. But then, something strange caught his eye. A man, perched high above the pit, not an official, not staff, just a visitor, staring down from the 20-foot ledge, unmoving, and then, without a word, without hesitation, he jumped. Gasps and screams erupted from the crowd. Some thought it was a stunt. Others froze, unsure if they were witnessing reality or a terrible mistake. But there was no time to process, no time to understand. The man had landed inside the bear's world, and Finn reacted. In an instant, centuries of instinct came to life. The bear lunged. Within seconds, he had the man in his jaws, lifting him like a rag doll, dragging him across the enclosure with terrifying ease. His teeth, strong enough to crush bone, clamped down. His claws, made for tearing, raked across flesh. The man screamed. Blood soaked into the dirt. The bear didn't stop. Visitors panicked. Some yelled for help. Others shouted, "Throw stones!" But no one could get close. No one could stop what was happening. Police officers had already been called when the man first appeared on the ledge. They arrived just seconds before the jump, but it was already too late. The bear had him. There was no time for negotiation, no time to reason with the wild. Armed with 9mm fragmentation rounds, officers first fired warning shots, hoping, praying that the noise would startle the animal. It didn't. Finn held on, his massive frame looming over the bloodied man. Then came the decision no one wanted to make. A single shot, straight to the chest. Finn recoiled, wounded, and finally backed away. The enclosure fell silent. Then a flurry of movement, zookeepers, police, paramedics all rushing into the enclosure. The man, battered and unconscious, was loaded onto a stretcher. His head and legs were mangled. Deep bites, torn flesh, a blood trail that told the story better than words ever could. And yet, he lived. Back at the hospital, his condition was described as comfortable. No name was released. Some said he was mentally ill, confused. But whatever his reasons, he had climbed into the wrong place at the worst time. And Finn, the bear, the attacker, the victim, was left fighting for his life too. The bullet had lodged in his chest. Vets worked fast, choosing not to remove the splinters, fearing it might do more harm than good. Antibiotics were administered, and slowly he began to recover. But the attack left more than scars. It shook the city. It broke hearts, not for the man, but for the bear. The people of Bern didn't blame Finn. He had done what wild animals do. He had reacted, survived, protected his space. Flowers appeared outside his enclosure, pots of honey. Messages written in shaky handwriting. "Forgive us," one note read. Even witnesses who saw the horror unfold couldn't escape the weight of it. One visitor, Sam Brooks from the UK, said, "I can still see it when I close my eyes." The bear was standing over him, throwing him back and forth. It was chaos. People were screaming. Footage from the attack showed the terrifying reality. Finn pouncing, jaws clamped around the man's shoulder, the victim bleeding as onlookers cried for help. But in the end, the most heartbreaking part wasn't the blood. It wasn't the screams. It was the understanding that neither man nor bear had truly won.